James, 35 years old, works at a tech company in New York. He has a decent income, a small family, and friends around him, yet he still feels empty. Every day, he's exhausted, anxious, as if carrying some invisible burden. One day, he happens to read about a mysterious monk named Eli, who doesn't give advice, he only asks questions that change people. James decides to go see him. He has no idea that what's been making him suffer isn't in the problems he talks about. James wasn't sure what he was hoping for when he decided to meet the monk Eli. All he knew was that something in his life, despite how fine everything looked on the outside, was quietly wearing him down. He had a good job in tech. People often said he was living the American dream, a high salary, a sleek office, even a ping-pong table and free snacks. But the endless Zoom calls, dozens of emails a day, and constantly urgent deadlines made him feel like he was trapped in a never-ending cycle. The more he worked, the more lost he felt. He used to love this job. Now, all he wanted was to shut off his laptop and disappear for a few days, maybe even weeks. Family was another delicate subject. James loved his wife and their 3-year-old son. But the sleepless nights, rushed mornings, and the petty arguments over who should take out the trash or who forgot to buy milk left him feeling constantly drained. "We're a team," he used to think. But lately, it felt like they were just trying to survive. And friends? At 35, James realized he rarely saw the people who once truly knew him. Life had gotten busy, and the old connections had slowly faded. These days, conversations were mostly quick texts, emojis, and "I've been slammed, let's catch up soon." Deep down, James felt lonely even in one of the most crowded cities in the world. His mental health had started to unravel, too. He had trouble sleeping, often waking in the middle of the night with a racing heart and vague anxieties he couldn't quite name. He had tried meditation apps, journaling, even signed up for an online yoga class, but nothing seemed to help for long. Then, one late night while mindlessly scrolling online, he came across a short article about someone named Eli, a modern monk who didn't offer solutions, but helped people find what's really keeping them stuck. The last line of the article made James pause longer than usual. "If you've tried everything and nothing works, maybe you're asking the wrong question." The very next morning, James called in sick and set out to find Eli. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for. Advice? A fix? A formula to put everything back in place? Or maybe just a reason to keep going? Eli lived in a small wooden house on the outskirts of the city, not far from New York, but just far enough to feel quiet and apart. There was no sign, no big gate. James had to follow a set of specific directions a friend who'd visited before had sent him, along with a short message. Don't expect anything, that's when he helps the most. James knocked on the door. An older man with a scruffy beard, wearing a hoodie and simple jeans, opened it. Without asking why James had come, without any long introductions, he invited him in. The room was sparse, a wooden table, 2 chairs, a few potted plants, and soft light spilling in from the window. Everything was so simple, it made James feel a little lighter. After a few minutes of silence, Eli finally spoke. "You're here because things feel tangled, aren't they?" James nodded. He began to talk. Strangely, the words came easier than he expected. No need to justify, no need to hide. "I'm exhausted from work even though I used to love it," he began. "I feel like I have to be on all the time. Emails, messages, meetings, performance. I feel like a machine." He talked about his family, how he and his wife felt more like shift workers raising a child than a real couple. He talked about feeling lonely in the middle of a crowded city, about waking in the night with nameless fears. The more he spoke, the more he realized how much he had been carrying. Eli just sat and listened. No nodding, no interruptions. No note-taking. No therapist like MMS. After nearly 30 minutes, James stopped, almost out of breath. "I know it all sounds small," he said, "but put together, it feels like I'm slowly sinking." Eli smiled. "I get it," he said. "You've got quite a few problems, just like the rest of us. So, can you help me?" James asked, his voice low, as if even he didn't expect much. "No," Eli replied bluntly. James looked up, stunned. "You have 83 problems," Eli continued, his tone as gentle as if he were talking about the weather. "Same as everyone. Work. Family. Worries. Loss. No one escapes them. You solve one, another shows up. Maybe you'll change jobs, your kid will grow up, you and your wife will find your rhythm again, but new problems will always come. That's life." James frowned. "Then, what's the point of coming here?" Eli looked at him, and his eyes gleamed with something quietly powerful. "Maybe I can't help you with the 83 problems. But I can help you with the 84th. James furrowed his brow, leaning forward as if he hadn't heard correctly. "The 84th problem," he repeated. "What is it?" Eli didn't answer right away. He stood up and slowly poured water from a small teapot sitting on a shelf. The room felt quiet again, save for the soft wind drifting through the window. James felt a flicker of impatience, but something in Eli's presence, in the calm uncertainty of his movements, made him stay silent. Eli handed James a cup of tea and sat back down, his eyes warm and unhurried, free of judgment. "The 84th problem," he said, "is that you want to have no problems at all." James's brow furrowed deeper. He opened his mouth to object, but paused. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Eli continued. "You believe that if you can just fix everything that's wearing you down, your job, your family, your health, your friendships, then you'll be okay. Life will be peaceful. Everything will fall into place. But that's an illusion." James sat quietly. Eli's words didn't sound comforting. In fact, they bordered on harsh. And yet, they rang true. "You see," Eli said, "everyone walks around carrying their own set of burdens, 83 problems. Some are big, some small. But nearly everyone has the 84th too. They don't want to have any problems. They think, if I'm smart enough, disciplined enough, strong enough, I can clear it all away. And when they can't, they feel frustrated, defeated, even ashamed. James set the cup of tea down. So, I just have to accept that life is always going to be messy? Not messy, Eli said. Just life. He leaned back slightly in his chair. You don't need to fix everything. You just need to understand that problems will always be part of the picture. But that doesn't stop you from living a meaningful life. In fact, sometimes it's the problems themselves that teach you to grow, to understand yourself, to love, and to let go. James was quiet. He didn't feel healed in any dramatic way. But something in him seemed to soften, a little release, a little clarity. So the 84th problem, he repeated, is just the wish to have no problems? Eli smiled. Exactly. And once you let go of that wish, the other 83? They're no longer burdens. They're just part of the journey. For the first time in months, James didn't feel the urge to rush off, to fix something, or to find an answer. He simply sat there with a warm cup of tea in his hands and a small, quiet peace returning to him. James sat in stillness, gently rotating the teacup in his hands as if trying to hold on to something fragile that had just begun to take shape inside him. Eli's words, so simple, so clear, felt like a mirror, reflecting back something James had never dared to name. He wasn't truly exhausted by the problems themselves. He was exhausted by his desire for them to disappear. So then, James looked up, his voice slow, measured. How do I live with the 83 problems without letting them drown me? Eli didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood and pulled out an old backpack, placing it on the table. He unzipped it and began taking out small stones, one by one, until the wooden surface was scattered with gray pebbles of all shapes and sizes. This is life, he said, gesturing toward the stones. Work. Family. Money. Health. The unexpected. The unwanted. Everyone carries a backpack like this all along their journey. The trouble is, most people think they have to get rid of all the stones before they can walk freely. He looked up at James. But what they don't realize is, a completely empty backpack gives you nothing to balance with. And when the wind comes and life will bring wind, it's these very stones that help keep you grounded. James stared at the pile of stones. And something began to click. Not all burdens are bad. Some exist to teach patience. Some remind us to love more deeply. Some, though unsolvable, help us recognize and savor moments of peace. The point isn't to have no problems, Eli continued. It's to learn how to carry them more wisely. James nodded, this time, not out of politeness, but because something real was landing inside him. You don't need to hold it all together, Eli said gently. You just need to remember how to breathe, even when nothing's perfect. And in that moment, life no longer looked like an endless list of unfinished tasks. It looked like a journey rich with ups and downs, joy and struggle. And James realized he didn't need to fix everything to feel okay. On the way back home, James couldn't find the perfect words to describe what had just happened. But he knew one thing clearly. He didn't need to throw away his 83 problems. He just needed to stop fighting the 84th and start living with the rest. More lightly, more consciously, and truly free. The following week, James returned to work, same packed meetings, same overflowing inbox, same deadlines that were always somehow due today. But something had shifted. Things didn't magically become easy. He didn't suddenly fall back in love with his job like he once had. But instead of feeling overwhelmed by the chaos, James began to see it as just part of the game. Instead of asking, "Why is everything piling up on me?" he found himself thinking, this is one of my 83 problems. And I'm still okay. He was surprised to realize that just stopping the fight against reality made everything feel lighter. At home, James no longer saw his wife as someone who added to his exhaustion after a long day, but as a partner, also carrying her own set of 83 problems. He began to share instead of judge, to listen instead of react. Their conversations became more honest, even if not always easy. His view of parenting shifted too. It was no longer just another responsibility stealing my rest. It became a chance to observe himself, to notice both his impatience and the moments of pure, quiet love he'd missed before, too busy solving problems. One Friday night, while putting his son to bed, the little boy tugged on his sleeve and whispered, "Tell the funny story again, Daddy." James laughed. Not because the story was particularly good, but because, for the first time, he realized that even in the middle of his 83 messy problems, there was still space for tenderness. And that was enough for a life that didn't have to be perfect to feel whole. That weekend, he messaged Eli, "I still have all 83 problems. But I've broken up with the 84th. Eli replied with nothing but a smiling emoji. James knew things would get messy again. A project might collapse. An argument might erupt. A hidden fear might rise up in the middle of the night. But now, he no longer felt like a victim of it all. He no longer needed to chase a life without problems. He just needed to remember. He was living. And that was enough.